Hey guys, today we are going to read Class 10th History, Chapter 1, Rise of Nationalism in Europe. The Rise of Nationalism in Europe. In 1848, Frédéric Saussure, a French artist, prepared a series of four prints visualizing his dream of a world made up of democratic and social republics, as he called them. The first print, the figure 1 of the series, shows the peoples of Europe and America, men and women of all ages and social classes, marching in a long train and offering homage to the Statue of Liberty as they pass by it. As you would recall, artists of the time of the French Revolution personified liberty as a female figure. Here you can recognize the torch of enlightenment she bears in one hand and the Charter of Rights of Man in the other. On the earthen foreground of the image lie the shattered remains of the symbols of absolutist institutions. In Soros' utopian vision, the peoples of the world are grouped as distinct nations identified through their flags and national costume. Leading the procession way past the Statue of Liberty are the United States and Switzerland, which by this time were already nation states. France, identifiable by the revolutionary tricolor, has just reached the statue. She is followed by the peoples of Germany, bearing the black, red, and gold flag. Interestingly, at the time when Soro created this image, the German peoples did not yet exist as a united nation. The flag they carry is an expression of liberal hopes in 1848 to unify the numerous German-speaking principalities into a nation-state under a democratic constitution. Following the German peoples are the peoples of Austria, the kingdom of the two Sicilies, Lombardy, Poland, England, Ireland, Hungary, and Russia. From the heavens above, Christ's saints and angels gaze upon the scene. They have been used by the artist to symbolize fraternity among the nations of the world. This chapter will deal with many of the issues visualized by Soru in the figure 1. During the 19th century, nationalism emerged as a force which brought about sweeping changes in the political and mental world of Europe. The end result of these changes was the emergence of the nation state in place of the multinational dynastic empires of Europe. The concept and practices of a modern state in which a centralized power exercised sovereign control over a clearly defined territory had been developing over a long period of time in Europe. But a nation-state was one in which the majority of its citizens and not only its rulers came to develop a sense of common identity and shared history or descent. These commonnesses did not exist from time immemorial. It was forged through struggles, through the action of leaders and the common people. This chapter will look at the diverse processes through which nation states and nationalism came into being in 19th century Europe. The French Revolution and idea of the nation. The first clear expression of nationalism came with the French Revolution in 1789. France, as you would remember, was a full-fledged territorial state in 1789 under the rule of an absolute monarch. The political and constitutional changes that came in the wake of the French Revolution led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to the body of French citizens. The revolution proclaimed that it was the people who would henceforth constitute the nation and shape its dynasty. From the very beginning, the French revolutionaries introduced various measures and practices that could create a sense of collective identity amongst the French people. The ideas of La Patrie, the fatherland, and Le Citoyen in the citizen emphasized the notion of a united community enjoying equal rights under a constitution. A new French flag, the tricolor, was chosen to replace the former royal standard. The States General was elected by the body of acting citizens and renamed the National Assembly. New hymns were composed, oaths taken, and martyrs commemorated, all in the name of the nation. A centralized administrative system was put in place and it formulated uniform laws for all citizens within its territory. Internal custom duties and dues were abolished and a uniform system of weights and measures was adopted. Regional dialects were discouraged and French as it was spoken and written in Paris became the common language of the nation. The revolutionaries further declared that it was the mission and the destiny of the French nation to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, in other words, to help other peoples of Europe to become nations. When the news of the events in France reached in the different cities of Europe, students and other members of educated middle class began setting up Jacobin clubs. Their activities and campaigns prepared the way for the French armies which moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy in 1790s. With the outbreak of Revolutionary War, the French armies began to carry the idea of nationalism abroad. Here you can see a map of the Europe after the Congress of Vienna. With the wide swath of territory that came under his control, Napoleon set about introducing many of the reforms that he had already introduced into France. Through a return to monarchy, Napoleon had no doubt destroyed democracy in France, but in the administrative field, he had incorporated revolutionary principles in order to make the whole system more rational and efficient. The Civil Code of 1804, usually known as the Napoleonic Code, did away with all privileges based on birth, established equality before the law, and secured the right to property. This code was exported to the regions under French control. In the Dutch Republic, in Switzerland, in Italy and Germany, Napoleon simplified administrative divisions, abolished the feudal system and freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. In the towns, too, guild restrictions were removed. Transport and communication systems were improved. Peasants, artisans, workers, and new businessmen enjoyed a newfound freedom. Businessmen and small-scale producers of goods in particular began to realize that uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, and a common national currency would facilitate the movement and exchange of goods and capital from one region to another. However, in the areas conquered, the reactions of the local populations to French rule was mixed. Initially, in many places such as Holland and Switzerland, as well as in certain cities like Brussels, Mainz, Milan, and Warsaw. The French armies were welcomed as harbingers of liberty, but the initial enthusiasm soon turned to hostility. So, as it became clear that the new administrative arrangements did not go hand in hand with political freedom, increased taxation, censorship, forced conscription into the French armies required to conquer the rest of Europe all seem to outweigh the advantages of the administrative changes. The making of nationalism in Europe. If we look at the map of the mid 18th century, Europe will you will find that there were no nation states as we know them today. What we know today as Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons, whose rulers had their autonomous territories. Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies, within the territories of which lived diverse peoples. They did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. Often they even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. The Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria-Hungary, for example, was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. It included the Alpine regions, the Tyrol, Austria, and the Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, where the aristocracy was predominantly German-speaking. It also included the Italian-speaking provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar, while the other half of the spoke a variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Besides these three dominant groups, there also lived within the boundaries of the empire a mass subject peasants people, Bohemians and Slovaks to the north, Slovens in Carniola, Croats to the south and Romans to the east in Trans Transylvania. Such differences did not easily promote a sense of political unity. The only tie binding these diverse groups together was a common allegiance to the emperor. How did nationalism and the idea of nation state emerge? The aristocracy and the new middle class, socially and politically. A landed aristocracy was the dominant class on the continent. The members of this class were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. They owned estates in the countryside and also townhouses. They spoke French for purposes of diplomacy and in high society. Their families were often connected by ties of marriage. This powerful aristocracy was, however, numerically a small group. The majority of the population was made up of the peasantry. To the west, the bulk of the land was farmed by tenants and small owners, while in eastern and central Europe the pattern of land holding was characterized by vast estates which were cultivated by serfs. In western and parts of central Europe, the growth of industrial production and trade meant the growth of towns and the emergence of commercial classes whose existence was based on production for the market. Industrialization began in England in the second half of the 18th century, but in France and parts of German states it occurred only during the 19th century. In its wake, new social groups came into being: a working class population and middle class made up of industrialists, businessmen, professionals, In Central and Eastern Europe, these groups were smaller in number till late 19th century. It was among the educated liberal middle classes that ideas of national unity following the abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity. That's all for today. We will see the left out chapter in the next part.